On the night of July 15th, Turkey was shaken by an attempted coup carried out by members of the FETÖ terrorist organization embedded within the Turkish armed forces. As the plot unfolded, they opened fire on civilians, bombed the Turkish Grand National Assembly, and used F-16 fighter jets to intimidate the population and seize control of the state. The attempt marked one of the most serious threats to Turkey's democratic order in modern history.
Milletime de bir çağrı yapıyorum. O da şudur. Milletimizi, illerimizin meydanlarına davet ediyorum.
Following an appeal by President Recep Tayyip Erdogan, millions of citizens took to the streets. They confronted the coup plotters and defended elected institutions. By first light on July 16th, the coup attempt had been thwarted.
Of course, this 2016 coup attempt was a turning point in many aspects, in economy, in security, in politics, etc. This ended the military remaining, if there is any military tutelage or kind of power. It ended the military's role in politics and economy, even foreign policy. And military became like any democratic country, where any bureaucratic institution listened to the elected government. Now, Turkish military listens to the elected government and appointments and other processes. Of course, there is internal dynamics, but the civilians appoint chief of staff and the head of military. And this changed the fight against terror.
Meanwhile, in Syria, the YPG and Daesh terror groups were gaining control over more territories just beyond Turkey's borders. Ankara's repeated calls for the international coalition to create a safe zone along its borders had fallen on deaf ears. Only a month after the 2016 coup attempt, Ankara decided to take action to counter the threat.
So the YPG began controlling Arab lands and Arab majority areas of Syria and expanded its territorial control and its occupation of Syrian territory. And with time, it looked like that the YPG was going to establish a separate entity within Syria that could break off from the country, that would have the oil reserves, the water reserves, the electricity generation areas, the agricultural lands, and a huge bulk of population. And the Turkish military operations were crucial in preventing that from happening. Because at that time, under the guise of fighting ISIS, the YPG SDF was expanding territory, and the Turks in 2016 intervened against ISIS and are the only NATO force that contributed boots on the ground and actively fought ISIS on the ground and prevented the YPG SDF from linking eastern side of the Euphrates River with the YPG's presence in Afrin.
Between 2016 and 2019, Turkey launched 3 direct military operations inside Syria in line with Article 51 of the United Nations Charter, which affirms the inherent right of states to defend themselves. Ankara's first move was on the 24th of August 2016, Operation Euphrates Shield in the northern Aleppo countryside.
400 kilometre karenin üzerinde bir alan, DAEŞ ve PYD ve YPG gibi terör örgütlerinden arındırılmıştır. Gelin Suriye'nin kuzeyinde bir güvenli bölge oluşturalım dedik. Bunu batılı dostlarımızın hemen hemen hepsiyle görüştüm, paylaştım. Hepsi de gayet iyi olur dediler. Bunu söylemelerine rağmen adım atmaya gelince şu ana kadar bir adım atılmadı.
The second was Operation Olive Branch in Afrin on the 20th of January 2018. It lasted 58 days and eventually cleared the YPG from Afrin. And the third, Operation Peace Spring, targeted the northern Raqqa countryside, western Al-Hasaka, on the 9th of October 2019. In just several days, crucial border cities in northeastern Syria, Tel Abyad and Ras Al Ain were taken back from the YPG. Turkey targeted both the Daesh and YPG terror groups, aiming to create a buffer zone between the conflict and its borders while preventing the establishment of a terror corridor along its frontier.
Bir terör örgütü kullanarak başka terör örgütü yok edilemez. Sonra o terör örgütü de sizin başınıza bela olur. Bunu Amerika çok iyi şekilde bilmektedir. PKK konusunun Amerika'nın da zaten terör örgütü olarak kabul ettiği bilinmektedir. Dolayısıyla PKK'ya doğrudan ve dolaylı yardım anlamına gelecek girişimleri bizim kabul etmemiz söz konusu değildir.
In that vacuum arises the YPG. It was viewed as a terrorist sanctuary and a possible terrorist threat to Turkey. There were occasionally cross-border raids and cross-border attacks coming from northern Syria into southeastern Turkey. And so the Turkish army moves in over a 3-year period to occupy a safe zone and create a barrier in northern Syria that would stop terrorists from crossing into Turkey.
Turkish military seriously fought PKK very effectively. Also, Turkish drone technology and defense technology, military technology also was improved during this process. This allowed Turkish forces to take care of the terror threat inside. Then Turkey began to even focus on outside in Iraq and in Syria. And after a certain period, of course, when you manage to handle the terror problem, it is easier to force these terrorist groups to table, which is what happened.
Turkey's military intervention made it possible for hundreds of thousands of Syrians who had fled the violence to finally return home. Mahmoud El-Hassan and his family were among the first to return to their village in Afrin.
طبعا مش كمان دلفرن بوفي ما كولي بوفي من كولي من كولي وينيهن يعني ناكابو 400 سال عمل الفيغوندينا الشتل زارته امش سال 2050 امش گنده خودر کتن پکا که هیرش گند کرد ما گنده خو مال خو ما هیچ تو هم در کتن هم چون رابو پکا که هات مال ما بر فابریقه ما بر خانه ما بر جیدوار مالی دار ما همو قد کرن کور ما برن یعنی اکتر بیم کریه ما دی صابرن از پاکی منی بچوک هبو دی صابرن او ملتی گند برن قیزک برن شباب برن گی توخوا کرن گی رزیل کرن همو ظلم و زور وان سر ملتی ما هبو بعد 2002 ها وقتی که هرش وقتی شباب ما چونی عفرین جيش حركتي عفرين باكا كرفيو رفيو هاتا في داري قندي ما وفيفيني وترفعتي وداري رابو الوداري كامباك تشيكر مخيم و400 مال دوير ده وهو خانه ما كربوها مدرسة جوي 400 مالي رو ومدرسة قند كربونا او هوجي كربونا جينا صحينا والله اماتنا وداره گنده خو ان شاء الله تعالی یعنی ان شاء الله می هندک همه کارا بجیونن و همه آویجی چیکن و همه مدرسه جی چیکن دغرب کن و جامعه ما چک تشتگره که همه ویجی دغرب کن ان شاء الله می گیج باره رنتربه
Turkey's counterterrorism efforts were also continuing on the home front. In 2016, Selahattin Demirtas, then co-chair of the HDP, was imprisoned on charges related to terrorist propaganda. The allegations related to his role in the violent riots of the 6th to 8th October 2014 in southeastern Turkey. PKK had also been notorious for its illegal activities, including drug trafficking. According to reports by Europol, the European law enforcement agency, the PKK ranks as the leading actor in drug trafficking across Europe. The terrorist organization is estimated to generate between $1.5 and $3 billion annually from trafficking drugs. Turkish security forces have spent years fighting the group's illegal activities.
Ben şehit uzman Çavuş Hatip Çağlar'ın babası Mehmet Çağlar'ım. 2017'de oğlum bir narko terör operasyonunda çıkan çatışmada şehit olmuştu. Allah bütün şehitlerimizden razı olsun. Allah mekanlarını cennet etsin inşallah. Özlüyoruz onu. Her an bir kapıda çıkıp gelerek baba diyecek bize, bekliyoruz onu. Tabii ki bu kendi tesellimizdir bizim için. Kabir başına geliyoruz, hem seviniyoruz hem üzülüyoruz.
Sergeant Hatip Çağlar was serving his 10th year in the military when he was martyred in the narco-terror operation in Diyarbakir.
سقنتي هذا قرتم قاعدة سبب مالا كشكاد دنيا مسكي هرمدني يشخروني يزكوناكم أوا أرجع كتينا بدلهم بتاعنا مدرجة يعني بري أزدشوا كيف أمدات أما أو روجي قد كيف أمدات تزار بري قبض مرا تمام فيها قو تمام قو زهر ميزانات أز إشي ملجكي هاي قوتها لتسازي تببا مقول تمام أو دركات خاري مدي تلفونا مليكات مجي أول راش تلفيني ما أول مذكر قهوة حبتكي برمهم دي قو أني مقوها أني أواج مر باي بكر قو هذا أمانة تأخذها مقول لا هذا غربة أمانة تأخذها بتشي أو شو demek ki ve çağık badıkken yeddarın görevi fosil peşay kurmuştuk. Geçik cümet ben anlatacağım akwa huysuz bu anlatacağım takvar sabırsız bu tuvayn vaate ben her mali medida abita telefoni mümkün. Telefoni mümkün govar khare la işete hay. Mego tişki hay gonana govar khare işte tişki beş. Hada katım khare govala go telefon cmerati be khati ben brindar. Mego أو بو قوانا قو بريندار قو يارالي قو يبين قوانين خاصة قو هذه مهر السر أمشون قرا ساعتك نف ساعتي ما نام قد ربي مهقياوي آني لا تسليم دحب قديمية أنا لا بيركاوي هي
Families whose children have been lured into terrorist traps, kidnapped, or indoctrinated were taking their own stand against the organization.
Biz içeridekiler sınır dışına çekilecek, silahlara son verilecek diye düşünürken örgüt yığınak yapmış. Çocuklardan savaşçı ordular kurmuş. Birazını Kandil'e çekmiş, birazını Suriye'ye götürmüş. Ve tabii ki Suriye'deki gelişmeler örgütü, yani Abdullah Öcalan'ın aldığı o silahsızlanma, geri çekilme kararını tartışmaya açtı.
In 2019, several families organized a sit-in protest in front of the HDP provincial headquarters in Diyarbakir. It gradually brought together many more families who had endured the same pain. Those families are now known as the Diyarbakir Mothers.
İlk gittiği günler insan bitiyor. Artık dünyası bitiyor. Hiç tarifi yok. Kapı çalınca odur, telefon çalınca odur. Evimin anahtarı da götürmüştü kendine. Ben zannediyordum kapı çalınca o geliyor. Çok zor. Kayıp çok zor. Yani kaybın bir tarifi yoktur. Ölüm yine iyidir. Hani bir mezarı olur, gidip mezardan şey yaparsın ama kayıp çok zor. Hiç o günleri unutamıyorum. İlk gittiği gün yürüyemedim, kalkamıyordum, düşerdim. Allah kimsenin başına vermesin. Ama bu terör belası çok zordu. Bizim artık yakamızdan düşsünler. Yani hep Türkiye'ye musallat olmuşlar. Özellikle küçük gençleri götürüyorlar. 14 yaşında, 15 yaşında, 16 yaşında, 9 yaşında. Eğer Kürt hakkı savunuyorsan, Kürt hakkı gel bizim mecliste savunun. Yazık değil bu gençlere, bu hele özellikle kızlara.
The Diyarbakir Mothers were later joined by fathers and brothers also searching for their loved ones.
Benim kardeşim 2015'te okulun önünde alıp götürdüler. Aradan birkaç sene geçtikten sonra kardeşim bana sosyal medyadan bir şekilde ulaştı. Benim kardeşim okuldan çıkıyor, arkada yani eve gelecek bir araç duruyor yanında. Babanın arkadaşıyım diye seni eve bırakayım. Bizim evle okul arasında bir 600-700 metre var. Biniyor arabaya, çocuğa orada bir içecek veriyorlar. Konuşuyorlar böyle bu şekilde çocuk bir gözünü açıyor. Lice'de götürmüşler bir şekilde oraya yerleştirmiş. Lice'den sonra Kandil'e götürmüşler. Kandil'den şu an bildiğim kadarıyla Suriye'dedir. Kardeşim gelmek de istiyor, dönmek de istiyor. Çünkü 13 yaşındaki bir çocuk. Yani 13 yaşındaki bir çocuğu alıp anneden, babadan, aileden uzaklaştırmak ne demek? Benim kardeşim gittikten sonra babam kanser hastası oldu. Kanserle mücadele yani vefat etmesine 1-2 saat bile kalmasına gözü bile kapıdaydı. Acaba oğlum gelecek mi diye. Babam görmedi, oğlum gitti 13 yaşında. Ondan sonra annem üzüntülere, acılara dayanamadı. Annem de şu anda yatalak yerde. Ben de kardeşim için 3 yıldır burada mücadele ediyorum. Belki döner diye, gelir diye.
A total of 384 families had taken part in the protests, and so far, 62 of them have been reunited with their children. Turkey was determined to eliminate the PKK's influence inside and outside of the country. Cross-border operations continued not only in Syria, but also in northern Iraq.
When PKK is moving from Turkey territory toward Kurdistan regional government's territory, it means it becomes more security issue, become let's say a part of political and security dynamics of Kurdistan regional government. So when you see PKK's presence in Sinjar, it was a big problem for Kurdistan regional government. PKK's presence in let's say Kandil Mountains and other places inside the Kurdistan regional government's territory, that caused many security issues for Kurdish here. Also caused replacement in the border.
Türk askeri aman dileyene teslim olana asla zarar vermez.
Between May 2019 and June 2020, the Turkish armed forces launched a series of operations against the PKK terror group in northern Iraq. Operation Claw first targeted Hakurk, then expanded to Sinat Haftanin, Metina, and Avashin Basyan. The most recent operation was in the Zap region and cleared many areas from the terrorist group.
Turkey conducted its operation against PKK almost, let's say, 75% of its operation against PKK outside its territory. They conducted operations against PKK inside Syrian territory. They conducted their operation against PKK inside Iraqi Kurdistan territory.
On February 2020, Ankara announced the launch of Operation Spring Shield, the fourth military intervention by Turkish forces in Syria. The operation was in retaliation to the Syrian regime's attack on Turkish soldiers and to halt the regime's advances towards Idlib. It was also aimed at creating a safe zone across the Turkish border for those fleeing the Assad regime. The United States, along with NATO, supported Turkey's move. Later, on October the 5th, 2023, the Turkish armed forces carried out a series of air and ground strikes targeting the YPG in northeastern Syria. The airstrikes were launched in response to the 2023 Ankara bombing carried out by the terror group.
First duty of any state is to protect its own people and its sovereignty and its border. And the myopia, the short-sightedness of the US and the coalition, without any timeline saying that this will end on a date certain or under these conditions, but to beef up the forces of the YPG that went over the course of, from 2014 to 2022, 2023, went from a fairly small militia armed mostly with light weapons to being a force with very highly trained tactical commandos and special forces with heavy weapons, and with a force in tens of thousands, including tens of thousands of Arabs, non-Kurds, under this SDF construct. That was erecting a massive threat on Turkey's borders. So anything that says, oh, but this is necessary for the defeat of ISIS, without looking at the context from the perspective of Ankara, was doomed to not only create problems, but to fail.
Turkey knew from decades of experience that you can't beat terrorism on the battlefield alone. In the fall of 2024, Ankara launched a major initiative aimed at ending years of conflict and suffering called Terror-Free Türkiye. This time, the call for long-standing peace came from Devlet Bahçeli, the leader of Turkey's Nationalist Movement Party, and a strong ally of President Erdogan.
Eğer terörsüz bir siyaset, terörsüz bir ülke, terörsüz bir gelecek hususunda herkes ittifak halindeyse, o halde değil elimizi taşın altına koymaya, gövdemizi koymaya varız ve buradayız. Şayet terörist başının tecidi kaldırılırsa, gelsin Türkiye Büyük Millet Meclisi'nde, DEM Parti grup toplantısında konuşsun. Terörün tamamen bittiğini ve örgütün lağvedildiğini haykırsın.
Study of counterterrorism shows that it's not enough just to shoot terrorists or to pursue them kinetically. Turkey has become very good at that, at the kinetic counterterrorism. But you also, you can't kill all the terrorists, we see that. Ultimately, that cycle of violence will produce new people who are willing to pick up arms and fight. There has to be a political dimension, there has to be an economic dimension. So I think Turkey has done a fairly good job of raising the living standards of the people in the southeast, which is where the PKK took its initial roots from. In terms of politics, the fact that there is a peace initiative going on is significant.
The fall of the Assad regime in Syria on December 8, 2024, further strengthened Ankara's Terror-Free Türkiye initiative. The opposition groups that took over Syria had a good relationship with Turkey, a country that had supported the revolution since the beginning.
Şimdi Türkiye'nin Suriye'nin kuzeyindeki kontrolü, yani Barış Pınarı, Zeytin Dalı harekatlarıyla kontrolü aslında Suriye devrimine giden yolu da açtı. Esed rejimi ülke içerisinde soykırıma varan varil bombalarıyla insanları katlettikçe Suriye'nin önemli ölçüde demografisi kuzeye doğru, yani rejimin kontrolünün zayıf olduğu alanlara doğru kaçtı ve Kuzey Suriye'de bir yığılma ortaya çıktı. Hem göçle mücadele anlamında önemli bir girişimdi Türkiye'nin orada Suriye'nin kuzeyinde bir kontrol sağlaması. Aynı zamanda Suriye'nin kuzeyinde kurduğumuz bizim nispeten özel yapılar Suriyelilerin ilk defa, uzun yıllardır ilk defa kendi kendilerini yönetebilecekleri bir takım organların ve kurumların ortaya çıkmasına vesile oldu. Suriye'nin kuzeyine dönük Barış Pınarı, Zeytin Dalı gibi harekatlarla buradaki terör koridorunu yok ettiği operasyonlar ve 8 Aralık'ta Türkiye ile yakın işbirliğindeki bir kadronun Suriye yönetimini devralmasıyla örgütün bu hayalleri bir bakıma ortadan kalkmış oldu. Dolayısıyla 8 Aralık aslında ülke içerisindeki aktörlerin, terör örgütü ve yandaşları ve Suriye'deki uzantılar arasındaki bir bakıma uçurumu ve irtibatı da zayıflattı.
With its borders now intact, Turkey was ready to embark on a new era. On the 27th of February 2025, PKK ringleader Abdullah Öcalan, who had been imprisoned since 1999, publicly called for the PKK terrorists to lay down their weapons and dissolve the organization. Then in March, Syria's new government reached an agreement with the SDF, led by the YPG terror group, to integrate its forces into the institutions of the new administration. The agreement, brokered by the United States, marked another milestone towards Syria's unity and regional security.
So I'm not saying that those people have no historically legitimate struggle of their own, but because that was linked to the PKK's broader struggle against Turkey, that was also doomed to fail. And the United States, on a temporary basis, as it turns out, exacerbated that by pumping up the capabilities of that group. And that's why now, stepping down its size, its strength, and subordinating it back under the state in Syria is the only path to peace. Without that, it's hard to see how the broader PKK terror campaign and the disarmament can actually proceed. So it's a critical piece.
In May, the PKK finally announced its decision to officially disband and surrender its weapons. Soon after, a much-anticipated ceremony was held in Iraq's Suleymaniye. Members of the PKK assembled to burn their weapons.
Örgüt aldığı kararı hayata geçirdiğini, özellikle de bir merasim yaparak silahlarını bıraktı. 47 yıllık terör belası inşallah sona erme sürecine girmiştir. Türkiye uzun, acılı, sancılı, gözyaşlarıyla dolu bir sayfayı kapatmaya başlamıştır. Ancak Türkiye Cumhuriyeti Devleti'nin onurunu, gururunu çiğnetmeyiz. Türkiye'nin başını öne asla eğdirtmeyiz. Terörsüz Türkiye projemizi de işte bu anlayışla izliyoruz.
Biz çektiğimiz başka çocuklar çekmesin, başka eşler çekmesin. Çocuklarım için, torunlarım için, yeni nesiller için bu terörsüz Türkiye'yi destekliyorum.
Şehit silah arkadaşlarımın, ben gibi gazi arkadaşlarımın verdiği emeğin taşlanacağı yegane unsur, yegane proje olarak görmekteyiz.
Ben Kürdüm ama ben bir Türk ne kadar Türkse ben de o kadar Türk. Ya bundan yani bunu artık kapanmasını istiyorum.
Across Turkey and even beyond its borders, many are hoping these flames represent more than a symbolic gesture. That we will soon see a complete disarmament and an end to a long and painful chapter in Turkey's history.